How much do you know about Antarctica? Welcome to the Everything Antarctica Podcast, where your hosts Maddie Jordan and Johnny Harrison will answer all of your questions. We'll talk to globally recognised experts, discuss current affairs, news, and ultimately highlight why Antarctica should matter to you. Come on a journey as we unpack everything you've ever wondered about the world's most extreme environment. Part of our reason for starting the Everything Antarctica podcast was to educate youth in Antarctic matters. We've realised that to reach the size and scale of the audience that we plan on reaching, we can't do this alone. For this week's episode, we teamed up with Remake Learning Days to do a live stream podcast about what life is like in Antarctica. Remake Learning Days is an innovative learning festival for families and youth. These festivals are running all around the world with events in New Zealand, the UK, Uruguay and the US. In Christchurch, New Zealand, this event is running between the 13th and the 19th of May 2024. Elsewhere in the world, events are running through right until the end of May. To get the kids involved and find out events near you, check out Remake Learning Days on Facebook, Instagram or at remakelearningdays.org.
All right, well, hello everyone. My name is Ariel from Remake Learning Days. I want to wish you a happy Remake Learning Days. And I'm really happy to be here today for a special Remake Learning Days event. And so Remake Learning Days is a festival every year for a month where communities open their doors for events and programs for families to learn alongside of each other. So, and it's also an opportunity for communities to learn about each other. There are a lot of diverse event hosts that we have, libraries, parks, video game design studios, maker spaces, museums, and more. And this, it started in the United States, but it's actually spread out around the globe. And we're excited to have somewhere new on the map. We're going to talk about Antarctica today. So today we have a very special event in partnership with the podcast Everything Antarctica. And we have hosts Johnny Harrison and Maddie Jordan with us. And so I'm going to ask Maddie and Jordan some questions. And then we're actually going to open it up to everybody on the Facebook if you want to drop questions in there and let us know what questions you have for them. But before we jump in, I was wondering, Maddie and Johnny, would you introduce yourselves?
Yeah, sure. I'll kick it off. So my name is Maddie Jordan. I'm originally from Perth in Western Australia, but now living in Christchurch, and I work full-time for New Zealand's Antarctic program. So a company called Antarctica New Zealand. They're a government organisation here in New Zealand based out of Christchurch. I've had 8 trips to Antarctica. I have wintered over once at New Zealand's Scott Base and have spent over 400 days in Antarctica. Along with Johnny here, we met down in Antarctica back in 2017 and have just joined forces recently to get this podcast off the ground to talk about Antarctica because we think it's really important, we think it's really special, and with everything that's happening in our world at the moment, we really see the need to have these conversations. So yeah, thanks so much for having us, Ariel. It's great to talk to you today.
And I'm Johnny Harrison. So as Maddie says, we sort of met down on the ice. I started off as a Scott-based electrician, so working for the Antarctic program down there, and then ended up doing back-to-back winters as station manager. So I've had about 5 trips to the ice all up now, and just over 800 days. So a little bit more than Maddie experience-wise, but
800 days. That's amazing.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
Long enough to know what kind of the general gist of it is down there. So I think another key thing that this podcast hopes to achieve is really capturing some of those stories from people and getting a true sense of what's going on down there, but also giving people a voice and a chance to actually share their story of Antarctica. So that's another key part to what we do. So and thanks very much for having us. So.
Of course. Yeah. I mean, the podcast is so awesome. Not only hearing the two of you share your stories about what it's like living in Antarctica and a lot of the things that I'm going to ask you about today, you actually have entire episodes about. So I really encourage everyone to go out and listen to those. You've got some amazing interviews yourself with different experts, people who are also experienced with Antarctica, glacier scientists, I think was one of your recent episodes. So just some really cool stuff going on there. So this is just one episode to highlight all of the awesome educational work that you're doing about Antarctica. And so I really hope people can go check that out. But so you've spoken to this a little bit, but when and what really inspired you to get the podcast going?
So I think it kickstarted before I headed down to Antarctica for my winter. Johnny and I caught up and he said, I've been thinking about this podcast idea for a really long time, and I think it's really important to share some of the stories from people that have lived and worked down there, but also just to educate people as well. So we love working with kids. We love bringing up that next generation and giving them an idea about what it's like and some of the really important work that's happening down there. So he said, we should start a podcast. And then I said, look, I'm going to Antarctica in a few months. I'm not going to have the time to be able to do that. But once I got back, we obviously caught up and we were sharing stories about our winters, sort of comparing and contrasting how similar and how different they were and how things were operated a little bit differently. And I think it was at that point Johnny was like, I'm still thinking about this podcast idea. We should try and make that happen. And it's been a crazy 6 months, really. So I think it was November that we did our first recording and decided that this is something that we were going to do, and then that released in January of this year. So we've been going weekly for the last sort of 14 or 15 weeks, and yeah, it really was Johnny's idea to kick it all off. So it's been great to get together and be able to do it.
It was one of those ones where we'd often, whenever we'd catch up, Antarctica's kind of the forefront of your mind, and I think it's a special place, and it bonds people that go down there, that shared experience thing. So it's definitely something we found. We were like, oh, all right, we keep talking about this, and there's all these other conversations we have with people, but it would almost be a shame if we ended up having those in isolation. So this kind of creates a real good forum to be able to actually share that learning, but also capture some people's experiences, so that the future generations can actually see, what did Pop do, and what did Granny do, and all that kind of stuff. So down the track, it'll serve that purpose as well, which is really exciting to see.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, we're super excited to have you. So I want to get off with the basics. Where is Antarctica?
Go, Maddie.
For those of us who don't know.
It's about as far south as you can get on the planet. So, essentially, I mean, from New Zealand, it's about a 5-hour flight south to get to Scott Base, which is where we work out of, and then probably another couple of hour flight to get to the actual South Pole. So I think one of the key things, the education pieces that we can impart today, is that Antarctica is not the South Pole, and the South Pole is not Antarctica. So Antarctica is the continent, which is essentially a landmass that's covered in a lot of ice, and the South Pole is the geographic point at 90 degrees south at the very bottom of the Earth. So often you hear those being used interchangeably, not 100% correct. So Antarctica is the continental landmass. It's the continent with that's covered in ice, and the South Pole is a singular point down the bottom that is 90 degrees south. So yeah, it's about as far south as you can go, and often people get the Antarctic and the Arctic a little bit confused. So the Arctic being up north, sort of Alaska and northern Canada for those in North America, but yeah, Antarctica is the similarly opposite continent down south.
Perfect. When you first arrived in Antarctica, how would you describe both of your first impressions, and what surprised you the most about when you first arrived?
I think there's that first moment where you step off the plane, or same thing if you're going down via ship. You step off whatever transport method you've taken to get down there, and you're just sort of taken aback that this is all real. That you're sort of taking in this experience that might have been so many years in the making, but it's also that sort of sense of cold that just kind of many people would have, if they live in a colder climate, or in winter when it gets a bit colder, you sort of step out your front door and you're kind of hit with that cold, and so it's sort of that on steroids kind of thing, as far as it's and then the sheer beauty and the expanse of the place kind of hits you thereafter. So just this giant vista that goes off in every direction, and this unspoilt part of the world, which is really, really special. Yeah, what about you, Maddie?
Yeah, mine was very similar. Stepping off that plane for the first time, just that first breath, and it's about minus 25 degrees Celsius. So yeah, it's getting quite cold when I first stepped off there. I don't know the exact conversion in Fahrenheit, but I don't know, let's call it pretty close to that minus 20 odd. And that first breath, it just feels so fresh and so clean. There's no civilization, there's no cities, there's it's a very clean environment. So that really is the first thing. It literally takes your breath away. And stepping off and just looking around, and everything's just pristine and white. We had a beautiful blue sky day when I first arrived, and the contrast between the blue in the sky and the white pretty much all around is just, it's quite special.
Yeah, I mean, so that was negative 13 degrees Fahrenheit in the conversion. How cold does it actually get in Antarctica?
Sorry, you got me.
It's one of those questions that is very difficult to pinpoint. It's like saying, how hot does it get in Australia? But the area that we operate in, the coldest recorded temperature that they've had there was minus 57 degrees Celsius as an ambient temperature.
Wow.
That's, again, colder than minus 40 Fahrenheit. So, it's definitely getting down there. But once you start adding the wind chill on top of that, it can feel quite a lot colder. So I think Johnny and I have both seen sort of minus 74-ish, which is minus 100 Fahrenheit once you start adding the wind chill in. But the coldest place on the planet is in Antarctica. Is a place called Lake Vostok, or Vostok Station, which is a Russian-run station, and I think it was minus 89.2 degrees Celsius. So extremely cold. That humans are not designed to live in temperatures that are like that. So it's colder than anything you could imagine feeling anywhere else.
And along with the cold, it ends up being so dry. So that's something that we often say that people might not really understand or kind of think of, is that Antarctica is a desert. And so because there's such low moisture, while you have all of this ice and some frozen lakes and things, it's not actually, there's no atmospheric moisture. So it doesn't rain in most places in Antarctica. There's some very, very high latitude places where it gets a little bit of rain, but by and large there's very low precipitation. There's very low kind of snow even falling from the sky. So it's a very dry place, and so it's cold, and that exacerbates the fact that it ends up getting very dry. So
wow, it's very dry. I never thought about that. So how do you prepare for all of this cold?
Lots of clothes.
So there's two types of preparation. There's the preparation before we go, and then there's the preparation when we get there. So before we head south, we get issued with extreme cold weather clothing, which is the gear that is designed to keep us warm when we're outside, and we're given an overview of how to use that, how to layer our different clothing. So typically we'll have a thermal or a merino, like a long john base layer, with potentially another layer of fleece on top of that, and then you start layering on your jackets and your jumpers and things like that. So that's the preparation before you go, and those items of clothing are worn on the plane so that when you arrive you are ready for the cold. So it's not like you just fly down there in your casual clothes and step off and then decide to try and work out and keep yourself warm. No, it's like you wear it all so that you're prepared when you get there. And then when you get to Antarctica, the first couple of days is spent doing training on essentially how to operate and how to survive in the field. So they'll take you out for a night camping where you'll really get an opportunity to use all of those different layers and try out different glove combinations and try out different fleece combinations and wear different socks and different boots and things like that. So you're put out there in a pretty heavily controlled environment, and there's people that are looking after you just to make sure that everything's going okay. But it's there's a lot of induction and a lot of training to get to that point. But yeah, it's different for everybody. Like what I might wear down south could be completely different to what Johnny wears down there in terms of layers. So
yeah, that's key to note is that everybody's personal preference for what they wear is completely different, and some people run warmer than others, and some run colder, right? And so right. There's definitely down to the individual as to what layers you need to wear, and that's where that training piece around taking so much more than you probably need, but the idea of actually testing those layers, what works well in those temperatures, and then throughout your summer season, and then particularly through winter. Well, by the time you get to winter, you've got a really good idea of, okay, this is for me. I can wear this kind of layer of clothing combination, and I know that I'm good down to whatever temperature. And then you sort of you've got your different sort of temperature bands, if you would, and whatever clothing layering system you'd have for each of those. So and then the other one is that we often, whenever we're going out, we'll always have a backpack with an extra layer, and so you've always got that kind of the conditions have changed more than I thought they would. Great, I'm prepared. So that's another cool key thing that they teach you on as part of your sort of your first few days of training.
Always come prepared with the backup.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So you both have gone down to Antarctica. Like, how many other people are down in Antarctica, and how many different countries? Because there's a whole bunch of different countries that are down there working, right? So how many different groups are down there? How many people around live in Antarctica?
Yeah, so there's probably around 5,000 people that live and work down there in the summer season, and then that reduces to about 1,000 people over the winter, and that's the southern hemisphere, or the austral winter. So when we talk about seasons, we're referring to southern hemisphere. So for those in the northern hemisphere, it's the opposite. There are quite a few countries that have Antarctic research stations and Antarctic research programs down there. To name them all, we'd be here for a while, but essentially many countries will have their own station that they operate out of, which is often driven by the proximity of their gateway city, or the city that they use to access their stations. So as an example, both the New Zealand Antarctic program and the US Antarctic program operate primarily out of Christchurch. So the flight route to get to McMurdo Station, which is the US, or the largest station on the continent, the flight route is from Christchurch. So we are quite close to each other, and then we do quite a lot of day-to-day work with each other. But similarly, the Italian Antarctic program and the South Korean Antarctic program also operate out of Christchurch. Their base is about 350 kilometres north of where we're stationed, but we still have that collaboration piece and operate there. So depending on different places, there are different areas that have different research stations. But as an example, Australia's got research stations, the United Kingdom's got research stations, Argentina, Chile, the US, New Zealand. So there are quite a few just scattered around the continent for different reasons.
Antarctica is protected by a treaty, and so there's a bunch of countries that have all signed on to the Antarctic Treaty, and one of the things that it sort of says is that this place of such importance and significance is actually reserved for scientific endeavours only, so which is a really cool thing. And so you've got a lot of these different countries operating in the same space, and no one country owns Antarctica, and so it's actually you can't even own a piece of Antarctica. So it's really special in that regard. And one of the other things is that there's a lot of good collaboration. So like Maddie's just been speaking about the Americans and the Kiwis and how much we collaborate. And as with so many other stations, if you're a scientist and you need to get somewhere, it doesn't really matter where you come from in the world. Often these Antarctic programs, their mission mission is to support science, and so often you'll find that we'll do everything in our power to make that happen. So it's a really cool place to sort of operate in, isn't it?
Yeah, very collaborative.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, that's super unique. And I think I remember in one of the podcasts you were talking about that even everyone was sort of latecomer to Antarctica. Like because it was so arduous, it took a long time for people to explore it, right?
Yeah, so sort of late 1800s, and a lot of the initial sort of discovery of Antarctica was sort of through the trade of sort of seals and whaling, and yeah, but once the continent was discovered and people started, coming up with different expeditions that they wanted to do, like the classic one is the race to the South Pole to be the first humans on the planet to actually reach 90 degrees south, and that whole heroic age of exploration that they call it. So your Sir Ernest Shackletons, your Robert Falcon Scotts, these really legendary early explorers that have paved the way for what we're doing at the moment. So even with their expeditions back in the sort of early 1900s, they had a scientific component to their expeditions. So they were there doing geology, looking at physics, geomagnetics, all different types of sciences that they could do in this pristine environment. So along with the expeditions that they were trying to do, there was often a scientific component there as well, which it's great. It's paved the way for what we do.
And then you fast forward, and then there was what we call the International Geophysical Year, and that was around 1956, 1957, and that's actually when a lot of these stations that we now have today were originally established. So that was all around the world, a global effort to kind of focus on some of these key sciences, and so a whole bunch more exploration got done at that point, and a lot more of the, what was that, probably 50 years between the sort of the last real exploration, and so 50 years of technology improvements, and so a lot better equipment to go and traverse some of these huge distances in such remote locations. So there was a huge amount of science research done at that time as well, in particular, and then has been continued since then, which is really, really cool.
Yeah, super cool. Yeah, a lot of collaboration happening in this small space, which is very cool. All these different countries working together. What inspired the two of you to explore Antarctica yourselves?
I guess I'll start this one. So for me, it was I grew up up in Auckland, in the largest city in New Zealand. But where I grew up, we've got a couple of Air Force bases, and family friends since I was young enough to talk had always come back with these photos of these penguins and things like that, and sort of spoke of this place, Antarctica. And so for me, I grew up knowing about this space, and that it wasn't actually that far away, and people that I knew had been down there. So sort of fast forward and then into my sort of 20s when I set myself up as an electrician, and it was kind of like, oh cool, I identified that yes, that was actually one of the roles that has a job down there. So that was great, and so I sort of pointed towards that and made that my focus, and got down there, and the rest is kind of history. So yeah, it was wonderful. What about you, Maddie?
Yeah, mine's
800 days later.
And hopefully a few more to come, but we'll see.
Yes.
Yeah, my story is a little bit different. So I grew up in Perth in Western Australia, which is a climate characterised by really hot, dry summers, and winters are, they're cool, but I didn't see negative temperatures until I was probably well into my teens, and I didn't see snow for the first time until I was 19. So I think for me it was always just a desire of wanting to experience what I never had growing up, but I just took it to the extreme. So
yeah, I was going to say to the max.
Yeah. So instead of coming to New Zealand for a skiing holiday or something like that, it was just like, okay, what's the coldest place that I can go to? But I've always had a fascination with wildlife. I mean, I grew up watching documentaries of Steve Irwin, the crocodile hunter, back in the day. I don't know if everyone's familiar, but he's a legendary Australian who made TV programs or documentaries based around the conservation of wildlife. And that for me was just, it had a big impact on my childhood, and I don't think I quite realised it until recently that was probably what kickstarted my love of nature and wildlife. So yeah, for me it just, I just love penguins. I love whales. And yeah, I think I come from an engineering background, so I'm a civil and construction engineer, and I really wanted to do something that gave back. So once I'd completed my degree and done my studies, I really wanted to contribute to the greater good and, you know, really just make the world a better place, leave it in a better place than what I got it. And Antarctica seemed like a really great place to go and apply my skills to be able to do that as well, contribute to some scientific knowledge and help out. So that for me was the driver.
And the snow.
And the snow, yeah. I think I've had more than enough snow now to last me a lifetime. But I still love it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you spoke penguins into existence, so I have to ask you. I actually have a question from one of the students. Stephanie asked, "Have you met a penguin? What are they like? And are there a lot of them around?"
Yes, I think we've both met penguins, but we haven't sort of shaken hands with them. So we have guidelines in terms of how close we can come to the wildlife. So generally it's a 10-meter distance or 30 feet for those in the States. And we do see them. They can be around sometimes towards the end of the summer more regularly. So the sort of January, February, March period, we tend to see quite a few more. But if we do encounter one and we sit down on the ground and they walk to us, then that's okay, because they're just being curious. They want to check us out, and it's an indication that they're not threatened by our presence. So if we're in the general area, we'll often just sit down and wait for them. And if they want to come over, they will. And if they don't want to come over, then they won't. So every encounter varies quite a lot. But I remember one of the trips that I went on, we were taking a Hagland adventure, which is an all-terrain tracked vehicle that you can drive over the sea ice. And we spotted a penguin miles off in the distance. It was so far away. And we stopped the vehicle, and some people got out and were just, curious to have a look. And the penguin just turned around and decided to start walking over to us. And he was squawking and making lots of noises, and then 11 of his friends joined in as well. So we had 12 emperor penguins, which can grow to about 1.2 meters, so about the size of a sort of 5 or 6 year old child. And they walk across to you, very curious, talking to each other. And yeah, it's just an amazing experience. Just one of those things that I think I'll remember forever. But they're beautiful animals. They're incredible creatures. Clumsy on land, but really special.
Yeah, and we've got particularly at Scott Basin on Ross Island, where we were, we get two different species of penguins. So we end up getting the Adelie penguins, which were a lot. Well, they're probably closer to about 2 foot tall, 600 mil. So they're not nearly as big. And then we end up getting the emperors. So we kind of get both ends of the spectrum, really. And the Adelie penguins are adorable. And as Maddie says, they're rather clumsy, and they sort of run around stealing each other's rocks from their nests, and just genuine, just an absolute joy to watch. Whereas the emperor penguins are much more majestic, and so they'll often just sort of bask in their own amazement. And it's great to be able to see those two very different penguins in such a close proximity. So, but then there's a bunch of other different variations of penguins that are all across Antarctica, which is really special as well, because other stations will get to see other variants of penguins. So we consider ourselves fortunate to have these wonderful encounters and be able to actually witness such amazing animals and their natural habitat. But yes, we're not alone, which is great too.
You mentioned a couple other, but what other types of wildlife do you see in Antarctica?
Yeah, so seals are probably the next most popular. So there's a colony of Weddell seals out the front of Scott Base, but there are other species of seal that exist in Antarctica. So you have leopard seals, which are a predatory sort of carnivorous seal. Crab-eater seals, which typically just eat krill, not crabs. Yeah, and Antarctic fur seals and elephant seals are the major ones, and there's also a widely unknown species of Antarctic seal called the Ross seal, and they're very rarely seen certainly don't come anywhere near Antarctic research stations and things like that. Spend most of their life on the pack ice, which is the sea ice that's sort of broken up, and they'll live on that. Give them nice accessible nice access to the ocean so they can go and fish and things like that. But we do see quite a few seals. The colony out the front is amazing because at certain times of the year we get to see them pupping. So they actually have little baby seals that they give birth to, and being able to go and just see them and watch what it's like for them to live their first sort of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 days on the planet, and just trying to work out how to move and how to eat and how to feed and things like that. It's really quite special.
And then some of the bigger ones we also get is a few different species of whale. So orca are obviously one of the ones that we get. There's a certain type of orca that come down, and then there's also minke whales and a few other bigger whales that also come through. But the ones that we typically see at Scott Base and McMurdo are the orca and the minke whales, which are pretty cool. It's always nice to sort of see the blowhole, the sort of this jet of air and water come out, and then you sort of know that something's going on, and particularly when it ends up being at the end of summer. So that's when a lot of the sea ice is kind of broken out, and so you've lived in this environment where it's kind of been like, yep, we've sort of seen some seals out on the sea ice and things like that, but once it all breaks out and you're drawn to this noise, because typically the rest of your season you haven't had noise coming out from the open ocean sort of thing. So it's makes for some pretty cool. Everyone kind of rushes out to the windows and out to the front of the base and kind of just enjoys watching things happen. So yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah, and the other part is we often see different types of seabirds as well. So the South Polar skua is a bird that we see quite a lot of, and also things like snow petrels and some other birds there as well. So quite common. But yeah, that's kind of the 4 sort of major ones, I think: the birds, penguins, seals, and whales.
Very cool. Very cool.
No polar bears.
Very important. No polar bears in Antarctica.
No polar bears. That is a very important educational lesson for all of us. Yes. So one of the things that I love about your podcast and your social media is just the everyday aspects of living in Antarctica, the daily routine. Can you describe what a typical day is for you in Antarctica?
Yeah, I think, again, this varies person to person. Everybody's got their own different routine and a different way of going about their day. But for me personally, I'll wake up in the morning. The first thing I'll do is go to the gym. So having a good fitness routine and staying fit and healthy is quite important. I'll do that, and then it'll be time to get ready for the day. So I'll have a shower and brush my teeth and things like that. I don't eat breakfast, but I'll grab a cup of tea and then head off, and often the first part of the day is just spent catching up with people, planning for what you're going to do for the day, having conversations around, what's the weather doing? Is that going to affect our plans for later on in the day, or is it going to be a nice, clear, beautiful day where we can be outside all day? And a lot of the work that comes down, that happens is ongoing operations and maintenance. So Johnny could probably speak a bit to that, because in the role as an electrician, that's a large part of the role that it makes up. But a lot of coordination activities that happen between different people on the base. So as support staff, as people who work on the base to support science, our role is often driven by what the scientists are up to. So if there's a group of scientists that are going off into the field and they need some assistance electronically, for example, that's something that Johnny might jump in and help with and make sure that all their gear is good to go, because you don't want things breaking when you're out in the field. It's better to get them fixed while you're in the station and you've got access to different supplies. There's a few meals that happen throughout the day. Lunch is a big one where people will get together and just chat about their day and coordinate activities and plan for what they're going to do for the foreseeable future. Lots of coordination. Essentially, we're there to support the scientists. So whatever science is happening and what the scientists need, that's going to be the big driver of what we get up to. And then around dinner time, people will come together again, catch up, and then after dinner, people might go for a walk. You might go down to the sea ice and see the seals, or if there's some penguins around, you might go down and take some photos of the penguins, or generally just getting outdoors and enjoying everything Antarctica has to offer, and then pretty much time to go to bed and do it all again. So it's largely me.
And interestingly, in summer we end up having 24 hours of daylight, so the sun doesn't set. And then conversely, in winter, we end up having the sun doesn't rise for 24 hours in the day. So so you think that like during the summer months, it's all very busy and there's lots of people and lots of things happening. And so, if you wanted to go for a walk, right the way through till any time in the evening, you know that you're going to have good weather, and you're also going to have lots of daylight, which is really cool. But it sort of means that we've got blackout curtains, big shutters on our doors, on our windows to make sure that when we do actually want to get some sleep, we can do that. So as Maddie says, so my role being sort of looking after the electrical stuff around base, so anything from testing appliances and making sure that everything's running, fixing things, if the coffee machine goes down, the whole base screams to a halt, so we've got to make sure we fix that quickly.
The important scientific
that's right. That's exactly it. It enables
Sustenance.
all of the rest of the scientific program, so it's key. But we also have some wind turbines and things, so it's really cool to be able to actually go and service those bits of kit that help us operate in a much more renewable sense. So there's a great varied role just in the electricians thing, as far as you might be helping some scientists, as Maddie says, get some equipment ready to go out in the field, right the way through to making sure that somebody's brought down a charger and just wants to make sure that it can work. You just kind of have a quick look over that and make sure it's all good to go, and kind of carry on with other things. So being sort of more base focused and being more base staff, you sort of a lot of your focus ends up being making sure that the base as an entity is well looked after. So doing some improvement projects and making sure that this piece of wall needs to come out, so we'll make sure that's all done well and all that kind of thing as well. So there's a great deal of things to do and never a shortage of fun to be had. So
there's different roles that have different focuses. So we have someone there who looks after making and treating water, and one of the things that you just don't think about elsewhere in the world is we have to keep that water in a liquid state. So they are often monitoring things like the water tanks and the pipe work to make sure that the water is actually liquid, so that when it comes out of the tap it's actually drinkable. So a lot of things that you don't think about, but many of the other roles have different roles and responsibilities. So we have a chef that operates down south, whose job is to prepare the food for everybody on the station. Lots of trade-based roles, but also people that are like we mentioned before, the people that take you out to teach you how to survive and train and things like that, the ones that keep you safe outside. So they're often experts in things like glacier guiding or mountaineering, or people that have spent quite a bit of time around snowy and crevassed areas. So their day might look completely different. They might wake up in the morning and have to accompany a science group out to a different area, and that could be their whole day. They might pack a lunch and take that with them, and they could just be looking after the entire science group for the day, making sure that they're operating safely and looking after their well-being and things like that. So it's dramatically different for everyone who's down there, but generally the day revolves around when you wake up, when you eat, and when you go to bed.
All key things.
Important steps. I mean, definitely I encourage people to check out your podcast talking about what's in the community kitchen. What does a meal look like? Frozen spaghetti, I think, is something you've shown. Does spaghetti freeze outside? Yes. That's very, very cool, very special. You're talking a little bit about 24 hours straight of sunlight and 24 hours straight of darkness. That's just, talk about going to the extremes. You mentioned blackout curtains. What are some other things that you do to kind of help your body adjust to such an extreme change in light?
I think that Maddie sort of touched on it as part of his bit as well, around routine is critically important. So making sure that you're trying to go to sleep at the same time, so that your body is just in a rhythm, so that it's like, this time is time to go to bed, cool, right, and just generally you'll function better overall. So and that's more important even so in the winter months, because that lack of sunlight you don't have any of those cues to sort of say, the sun's come up, I should probably get out of bed and go and make the most of it. So you got to be a little bit disciplined in that regard. And we often find that people that make sure that they do have a good routine in place generally handle that transition, and particularly the winter months, a lot better. It's a lot easier in summer because there's just so much going on, and most people just end up getting so tired because they're just doing so much, and because you've got so much sort of, so many recreational activities that you can do, and also because you've got that extra daylight, that's pretty much just go, and then make sure that you're getting plenty of rest as well. But in winter it's a bit different, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, in winter as well, we take supplements like vitamin D supplements because we're not getting that naturally from the sun, and lots of little things like that. Just making sure, like Johnny said, have a good routine. I had my alarm and my go to bed sort of triggers on my phone set for the exact same time for the entire 9 months that I was down there, and tried not to deviate from that too much, which is helpful. But I think back to a story where I was sitting down talking to someone at dinner one night, and she said, I'm going skiing tomorrow at 9. And I said, okay, cool. Are you going at 9 a.m. or are you going at 9 p.m.? Because it's totally feasible that someone might be doing both of those at different times. And she's like, no, I'm going at 9 a.m. Like, I have the day off tomorrow. But totally feasible that someone might go skiing at 9 p.m. in summer because, it's still bright outside. We've got 24 hours of communication, so someone's always in contact with her. And but those sorts of questions are the things that need to be asked, right? Because it's just one of those environments that is a little bit different to everywhere else.
And another thing that helps in winter as well is the wake-up clock. So you kind of end up having an alarm clock that is essentially a light that slowly comes on, and so that again is meant to help with your circadian rhythm or your daytime nighttime cycle. So that can also be quite useful, and a lot of people sort of find those quite good.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, I want to open it up to questions from viewers now. I have one question that came in. We talked a little bit about food. Can you grow food in Antarctica? And what kind of food do you grow if you can?
So we don't, but there are some stations that do. And it's essentially a hydroponic setup to make fresh fruits and vegetables, or typically fresh vegetables rather. So people might grow spinach, or they might grow tomatoes, or just little things like that to supplement it. Because if you think about it, typically in the wintertime, if we take the South Pole Station, for example, so there is a research station right at the South Pole, and their season essentially closes from kind of February through to November, and there's no way that they can get resupplied. There's no flights that come in because it's pitch black and freezing cold. So they will have a little setup where they can grow some vegetables to make little salads, and that might be a salad that they have once a week or maybe twice a week if they get a good crop yield or something like that. But it's hydroponic. It's very heavily controlled, so making sure that there's no sort of biosecurity incursions and things like that. It's all very clean and done in a very heavily controlled way, but that will produce some vegetables and things that will provide some vitamins that people typically wouldn't have. And I think you can't underestimate how good it is in the middle of winter just to eat something fresh. Like, a lot of our food comes frozen, so the things like all of the meals that the chef prepare typically come from frozen goods or baked in the case of breads and things like that. But I remember in August we got a bag of oranges sent down to us, and that orange that I ate was the first piece of fruit that I had in 4 months, and it was the best thing I've ever eaten in my life. So there are some stations that have a small sort of hydroponic growing setup, but doesn't apply to every station.
And you have to keep that frozen food in freezers, right? Even though it's negative 75 or something.
Yes, that's often a misconception as well. If it's so freezing cold, why would you have freezers? And what we find is that in the summer months it does actually get a bit warmer, so it's quite good to have those in a controlled temperature. But even in winter, some of the freezers will get turned off once the temperature gets low enough. But then we end up having heaters in our refrigerators, and that's in order to do the exact opposite and make sure that our refrigerators don't actually freeze up. So But our refrigerators are a bit unique in that our outdoor ones have both cooling elements and also heating elements in them, so they can make sure that they control that temperature as best they can. So that's definitely a unique thing.
Yeah, all right, everyone. If you have questions, please drop them in the chat. Okay, I've got one question here. What is the most common myth about Antarctica that you've found to be untrue?
The polar bear one, probably.
Probably the polar bear one, yeah. I get questions quite commonly on social media about, how do you just go outside for a walk with, no protection and things like that? Aren't you scared of polar bears? And
lots of bear spray. No.
Yeah, I like to tell people that there's a polar bear behind every tree, because we don't have trees in Antarctica either. So that's probably the biggest one I think that we get quite commonly.
Yeah, and we get lots of penguins, whereas up in the northern hemisphere, up at the North Pole, there's no penguins up there. So each area's got its different little uniqueness, and we're quite happy with just having penguins, aren't we?
Yeah. I'm happy to not go for a walk and encounter a polar bear.
Absolutely,
that's for sure.
Good question.
You've got enough protection on from the cold,
Yeah, and that's definitely one of those ones when you end up having so many layers on, it does kind of restrict your movement. So you sort of end up being like a giant marshmallow trying to sort of run around. It wouldn't be well for us, would it?
Yeah,
but it would be funny.
It would be, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Somebody was wondering, what do you do for fun in Antarctica?
Oh, that's a great question. So recreation is really important. It's one of those really critical things that we do as part of a good routine and to look after our mental health and things like that. So I just really enjoy going out walking and taking photos. It probably consumes like the majority of my recreation time, but we have access to things like fat bikes. So they're mountain bikes with quite large tyres that allow you to ride over snow and ice. So people often go bike riding. We've got access to cross-country and downhill skis, so people can go off skiing. There's snow around.
9 a.m., 9 p.m.,
exactly.
Whatever floats your boat, right?
Yeah. So going for a cross-country ski is something that people get up to as well. And general wildlife observation, just going out and looking at the seals and watching the penguins and things like that. And it's a little bit different in winter. There's a lot of different things that are going on as well. So, yeah. Yeah,
in winter we're pretty fortunate to be able to see the aurora. So up in the northern hemisphere, that's known as the Aurora Borealis, and in the southern hemisphere it's the Aurora Australis. And so it's the same effect, and so we get to see the southern lights, which is pretty cool. So you can be wandering around, and because we end up having 24 hours of nighttime during the middle of winter, we can actually see aurora in the middle of the day, and there's not many places in the world that you can see that. So as Maddie sort of says, we lots of time taking photos and getting out and enjoying being in Antarctica. There's also a bunch of different recreational things, so and using vehicles. So we're pretty fortunate and able to early season go up, jump in some of the Hagland vehicles that Maddie sort of spoke about earlier, which are tracked vehicles, and we go across the sea ice, and this picture behind us actually was taken in one of these huts, one of these historic huts. So that's one of the things that we're really fortunate and able to do is actually go in and explore some of the early explorers' huts and kind of sort of follow in some of their footsteps and sort of see where they actually walked and what part of Antarctica they actually sort of spent their time, which is super awesome just to be able to be part of that. And kind of when you start reading these stories of these of the heroic age of exploration in Antarctica, to be able to actually say, oh well, actually yes, I know what you're talking about when you say that because right. I've actually seen it. So that's we're so privileged in that regard. And then there's snowmobiles down there as well. So often if you're lucky enough and you might get one snowmobile trip in a season, in a summer season, which is a heck of a good time. And I know Maddie hasn't done it yet, so you have to save that for another day. But that's always a real highlight. And there's just going out for a walk after work and just enjoying standing on top of a hill and just taking it all in is you can't beat it. That's for sure.
Yeah.
You mentioned the Aurora Borealis. Would you mind just speaking a little bit more for folks who don't know what that is?
Yeah, sure. So that's a chemical reaction, and what happens is the energy from the sun hits and interacts with our magnetosphere, and so what happens is that ends up exciting particles in the atmosphere, and that causes what we call an aurora, and so more commonly it's colloquially known as the northern lights and the southern lights, and so that's when the sky will light up all different colours, and depending on what chemical reaction and at what altitude in the atmosphere it's happening, that will appear in different colours, and so we might see green or red or yellow, or and so if we're lucky enough we might even see blue, and so that ends up being very hard to see with the naked eye, and that's because we've got rods and cones in our eyes, and both of those things do different functions, and so our low light vision that we use and we need to be able to see in the dark doesn't do particularly well with colour vision, and so we might be able to see what looks like a moving cloud and a very fast moving cloud sort of up in the sky, but we won't necessarily see the colour with it. But then if it's more pronounced, if it's a better display of aurora, that's when we can start seeing it in colour, and I have one very fond memory of seeing the entire ground lit up green and being able to see the sky completely covered in green with just such spectacular aurora, and essentially you could walk around like it was daylight because it was just that bright. So
Wow.
There you go in a nutshell. Anything to add to aurora?
No, for me, I'm not so involved in the whole technical side of things. I don't really need to understand why it happens. I just go outside and go, wow, that's really beautiful, and I'm really privileged to be sitting here able to watch it and see it. But the northern lights are seen quite commonly across sort of Canada, Alaska, even the northern parts of the continental United States, around some of those states up there on the Canadian border, and then across Europe as well, so Iceland, Norway, Sweden, Finland, Russia, quite commonly seen over there as well. So it's essentially the same thing, we just get it in the south, but it's not seen as commonly because there's not a whole lot of land in the area where the aurora is really pronounced. So
Gotcha.
So you really need to be in Antarctica or the sort of the southern parts of New Zealand and Australia, around Tasmania and things like that, to be able to see it quite well. But the whole ocean between New Zealand and Antarctica, and Australia and Antarctica, is probably the prime spot to be. So unless you're bobbing around in a boat, you're probably not gonna see it sort of every day. But in the contrast, in the north, that area sort of goes straight through the likes of Fairbanks, Alaska, and some areas up there. So there's areas where there are cities and there's quite a bit of habitation up there, so people see them quite commonly in the winter. But for us, it's just it's a privilege to be able to be down in Antarctica and see the southern lights there.
And another interesting phenomenon that we get to witness, which is pretty special as well, is called nacreous clouds. And so these are technically known as polar stratospheric clouds, and it's another similar sort of chemical reaction happening up in the atmosphere. And it looks like it's sort of like when you've seen oil on top of water, and it sort of goes all that mother of pearl colours, and you sort of see all these amazing colours. And so picture that, but on these clouds in the sky, and it's just such a magical thing to view, and there's very few places that see those, and they're much more rare even than aurora. So
Wow, very cool. Sounds otherworldly.
Definitely has its
especially
moments,
with
doesn't
that.
it?
I mean, sounds like with that all white ground as well. You were talking about the light reflecting off of the ground as well. Just sounds pretty wild. So all right. We've got a question from Yasmin. How has climate change affected daily operations and research in Antarctica?
Hey Yasmin, great question. So the climate change is essentially the whole reason why scientists are down there, and they're trying to work out what the impact is now and what it's going to be in the future. So a lot of the science that we do support is focused on different areas. So we might have some scientists that are looking at sea ice growth, and they could be focused on the oceans, and then we might have another group that are focused on glaciers and ice sheets, and they're looking at the difference in the mass and accumulation of snow and development and melting of those. We have other scientists that are looking into different properties like atmospheric physics, so they might look at what's happening up in the atmosphere and look at different particles and molecules and things that are in there and how that's changed over time. And then there are people like biologists and other people that look after researching animals, and they might, as an example, track a penguin colony and look at the development in the penguins over time. So are they getting heavier, which means they've got more food, or are they getting lighter, meaning that there's not as much food available? So a whole different range of research that ultimately is trying to answer the question, what is our world going to look like in a changing environment? And the scientists are doing amazing work. It's really, really incredible. And all of the research that happens is really important. So it doesn't matter if you're researching penguins or if you're researching what's happening in the environment or looking at the ice sheets. It's all complementary and it all contributes to a bigger picture of what's going on. So the work there it's the whole reason why countries are in Antarctica. It's to support peace and science and to get a better understanding of what's happening in our world. So yeah, great question and amazing work that's going on. I'm in awe of the scientists and the work that they get up to. They're amazing people.
And that's the whole reason you go down, right? Is like that whole being able to support and like you sort of spoke about earlier, Maddie, around just wanting to give back and actually sort of what part can you play? So I don't think you get involved in Antarctica without having some level of kind of wanting to sort of help that scientific endeavour.
Yeah, great question. Yeah, thank you for that. So one final question I had for the two of you was, if somebody was interested in working in Antarctica, what skills or activities do you suggest that kids work on in order to fulfill their dream of freezing cold in snow and exciting adventures and snowmobiles?
I think the most important thing is to just clarify that you don't need to be a scientist and you don't need to go to university and you don't need to be the smartest person on the planet to go and get a job in Antarctica. There are lots of different support roles that can be used down there. And I mean, I come from a construction background and work in project management. Johnny is an electrician. And like there are lots of scientists that do go down there. Don't get me wrong, that is a great way to get down to Antarctica and to contribute and to give back. But similarly, if you're in the trades, then that's great too. I mean, there are some stations like McMurdo Station has a fire department, for example, so they hire firefighters and things like that. So it's very diverse and a wide range of skills. But I think generally just be able to not only work on your own, but really get along with other people as well, because it's a small community environment where the success of your day could be dependent on someone else helping you. So that ability to collaborate and get along with different people is really important. And I think recognizing that working in Antarctica, you're often away from family and friends for quite some period of time. So developing that resilience and ability to solve problems while, you don't have a hardware store down the road, so you can't just go down and pick up a missing piece. You have to just sit there and solve problems and try and work it out. So some of those cognitive skills around how do we fix this problem, and a desire to get through and make do with what you've got is important. But there's a whole bunch of other things.
Yeah, I think as well on the back of that, around making sure that you understand the level of commitment, because I mean, both Maddie and I have spent a lot of time away from our friends and family, and so while we've had an amazing adventure and there's so many amazing great things that we've been able to do, it has there is always a cost to that. And so if you've got family or friends that you're going to miss out on milestone birthdays and all those kind of things, so that also something to keep in mind. But I think there's, as Maddie was saying earlier, there are so many different roles to get down there, and there's so many different things. And also, I mean, we're potentially talking to people that might end up having very, very different careers to what Maddie and I have had, and who knows what Antarctic research is going to look like in 20 years, 40 years, 50 years time. So by all means, don't sort of pigeonhole yourself, but I think that's where Maddie's sort of going on around making sure that you understand how important community is, and being involved, and sort of actually helping one another rather than just kind of what's good for me. That's a really, really cool and key attitude to have, particularly when you're so isolated. So
I think kids these days are definitely, this is at the forefront of their minds, and this is really something that they want to contribute to with what's happening in our changing world. So I have no doubt that the kids of the kids that are listening to this are going to be the ones that have some really world changing ideas and contribute to some really incredible things. So just pursue your passion, do what makes you happy, just follow along, because you never know what that might lead to. If you're into AI and tech development, you may develop a new piece of instrumentation or new equipment that revolutionizes the way that scientists collect data and do their work. So just push forward, just keep it in the back of your mind. And
there's also a whole bunch around the creative arts space as well. One of the big things that needs to be told is the stories of Antarctica, and so how do we actually communicate that? And so there's a whole bunch of things around there that you could actually you need to go down to Antarctica to get some inspiration and undertake some work so that you can actually try and communicate that in a way. So there's all that side of things as well. It's pretty exciting, isn't it?
Yeah, we have actually done a podcast episode on how to get a job in Antarctica, so that's on our YouTube channel and Spotify as well. If there's some more information, and we dedicated probably a good half an hour, 45 minutes onto our different ideas and throwing thoughts around. So that might be another place to go and just get some additional information. But
absolutely,
just do what makes you happy. Just That's the
I think that's
thing.
the best advice. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, so I really want to thank you both so much for your time today in talking about all of your experiences. And I know you have so much more to share. Where can people find more about you, find more about Everything Antarctica? Where can they hear more?
So we're on all social platforms and all streaming services. So you can find video episodes of our podcasts on YouTube and Spotify if you just search for Everything Antarctica. And we are on all social channels as well, so on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and again, just at Everything Antarctica will be the place to find us there. But we just really love getting the word out about Antarctica. We just think it's a place that's not spoken about enough, and we really want to inspire that next generation. Kids on here. It would absolutely be a life highlight for me if in 15 years' time someone reaches out and says, hey, thanks to the podcast episode that you did with Remake Learning Days, I'm getting ready to go to Antarctica. That for me would just be, that's a legacy that we'll leave behind, and it tells us that what we're doing is worthwhile. So we really just want people to engage in what's happening down there and get a better understanding of the work that's going on and what people are trying to do to help us understand what's happening in our changing world. So please, someone who's listening to this live stream, dedicate your life to science and working in Antarctica. It'll make us really happy.
And thanks so much, Ariel, for setting this up, and having us as part of this Remake Learning Days. We really appreciate being able to come along, and we hope people have enjoyed this.
We're really looking forward to checking out Remake Learning Days as well, because it's happening in Christchurch, which is the city that we're in. So over the next month or so, we're really looking forward to getting involved in some of the activities and things that are happening around town. So thanks very much for reaching out and making this happen.
Of course, yes. And like you said, Remake Learning Days is happening all over, and it's still going on through the rest of the month of May. We've got hundreds of events from amazing different people such as yourself, learning about all different kinds of topics. And I hope that you can check them out either close to you or virtually online. There's a lot to check out. So again, thank you both so much. It's been wonderful to learn about Antarctica. And if we leave with anything, it is that there are no polar bears in Antarctica.
And Antarctica is not the South Pole, and the South Pole is not Antarctica. There is a little distinction.
Yes.
There you go.
Wonderful.
Okay. Thank you both so much, and happy Remake Learning Days to everybody. And please remember to check out Everything Antarctica. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Cheers. That's it for today's episode of the Everything Antarctica podcast. Thanks for listening. If you want to find out more about us as hosts, you can find us on Instagram at Maddie K. Jordan and at Johnny Harrison NZ. We're also on socials. You can find us at Everything Antarctica. This episode will be released on all streaming platforms and the long-form video will be found on YouTube. Check us out wherever you listen to your podcasts.
If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe and leave us a 5-star rating. This will really help us in our mission to make this podcast as good as it possibly can be. Please share this episode with your friends and social networks so we can spread the word to more people.
Until next time, stay cool.